Hey guys, I'm Heidi Priebe. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. This month on this channel, we're talking about resilience. And today what I want to talk about is finding our way out of states of depression. And the first thing that I want to get really clear on is that when I say depression, what I am not talking about is a state of grief, or a state of loss or sadness. What I'm talking about is a state of being unable to access our true emotions. So states of feeling numbed out, or like whatever is alive for us inside of our bodies is not accessible to us. So when I talk about working one's way out of depression, and this is all filmed based on personal experience, as depression is something that I've dealt with on and off throughout the course of my life, what I'm talking about is actually reconnecting to the parts of ourselves that can feel the entire range of emotion, rather than the parts of ourselves that want to retreat in fear or back away from feelings that are difficult. And the reason that I wanted to make this video in this way is because it was a framing that really helped me in my last depressive episode. There's an exercise I learned that I never forgot when I was studying NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, which is a coaching modality, that's trying to get at what small actions we take on a day-to-day basis that perpetuate what we're going through. And so basically the way the exercise works is that you imagine that whatever it is you're going through, so in this case for myself, I was using it to model my own depression, is something that you are going to outsource to another person for a day. So if I were doing a session like this with an NLP coach, essentially I would go in and they would ask me, okay, if you are going to give me your depression, so I will do it for you tomorrow, what is it that I would have to do to make sure that I am getting your depression right? So what actions would I take first thing in the morning to make sure that I stay depressed through the morning? What actions would I take in the afternoon? What thought patterns would I focus on? How would I respond to other people? How would I think of the future? What stories would I tell myself about myself? And the idea here is not to say that you are the sole cause of anything that you are feeling. It's to look at where we have these choice points that we might not notice we have when we are feeling disempowered. So when we are feeling like we are stuck in looking at things through a very narrow scope, which is very often what's happening when we are depressed, using an exercise like this can help us gain some perspective on all of the small ways in which we're pushing away our actual feelings and where we could make a different choice, potentially, to get back in touch with them. So I'm going to go over 10 ways that I tend to keep myself depressed unconsciously when I'm going through a state of depression, as well as what the opposite of those things might look like, and how, if you recognize yourself in any of these, you might be able to start reconnecting to the authentic emotion that exists below the surface of depression. Because in my opinion, it is always the reconnection to authentic emotion that gets us out of these depressive states. So the first thing I would do, if I was trying to hand my depression over to someone and allow them to do it for me for a while, is I would tell them, as soon as you wake up in the morning, the first thing I want you to do is become panicked at the thought that you need to map out your entire future perfectly all at once. And you should not even think about taking a step forward until you have that perfect future mapped out. Very often for myself, I find that depression shows up when an old dream that I had, or an old way of doing things, or maybe an old way of relating to people is no longer working in my life. But because I don't want to sit in that existential void of loss and loneliness and not knowing what comes next, what I tend to do when I feel things crumbling is I start trying to reconstruct my vision of a future that would allow me to bypass feeling the pain of whatever it is in my life that is no longer working or that's ending, because I can immediately replace it with a very polished and positive vision of the future. The problem is that my body is usually not on board with that vision of the future, because what my body wants to do is grieve. And so the opposite of this, the opposite of getting fixated on a perfect, polished future that your body secretly just is not ready to step into the way you wish it was yet, the opposite of that is staying present with whatever feelings are there, while accepting that you just don't know yet what the future is going to hold. And this is a position that it's very intimidating to be in because it's a state of uncertainty. But the reason it's so important to be present with feelings of loss, of grief, of anger, is because they are teaching us important things about what matters to us. And those things are the lessons we need to learn in order to build a future that makes sense. We cannot skip over the period of loss where we are making sense of what happened that caused us to let go of parts of our lives that we don't want to let go of. We need to be able to internalize those lessons in order to build a new future that authentically flows out of the past. And if we're trying to rush too quickly ahead, a lot of the time what happens is we just end up making the same mistakes over and over again. And so what I like to think about whenever I can, if I find myself in kind of a valley of depression, is what moves, however small, however seemingly insignificant, does my body authentically want to make right now? So this is about learning to get familiar with the very subtle yeses and nos of your body in the present moment as the exact person you are right now. So the opposite of getting fixated on this imaginary future where you can bypass all of the pain is staying present with the pain as much as you can of whatever is happening in your life and feeling through it, feeling where your energy naturally wants to go and where it doesn't. And sometimes that means a really long period of rest needs to happen before your body wants to get up and feel strong and capable and excited again. But what's important is listening to that, rather than resisting it in favor of trying to force your body to conform to a future that it just might not be ready for yet. The second thing I would do if I were giving someone instructions on how to become and stay depressed on my behalf is I would tell them to not adjust their expectations whatsoever in this period of depression from what my expectations for myself are when I am functioning at full capacity and thriving in life. Very often, the reason why we fall into these freeze states, or these states where it just feels impossible to get connected to feeling, is that we tell ourselves stories about how we should be feeling. And then we pummel ourselves with shame when our natural energy just does not align to that. It does not matter how competent, how successful, how well-rounded, how loved and supported we all are. We are always going to have periods of life where we are thriving and periods of life where we are just hanging on and surviving and getting through them. And if during those survival periods, we're expecting ourselves to act the same way we do in those thriving periods, we are going to end up in a very long struggle against our natural energy. And so to work with this, I came up with this idea when I was a teenager, actually, that's helped me through almost every depressive period, which is that when I recognize and I'm ready to admit to myself, okay, I'm depressed right now. I'm in a state where I don't have access to my natural energy supplies. I ask myself the question, how can I be the best, worst version of myself right now? So not the best version, not the version of me that is hitting it out of the ballpark in every area, but how do I manage the energy that's actually online for me right now as well as I possibly can? And so in the back of my head, I kind of think of this as my surviving protocol. When I'm thriving, my energy kind of directs my life for me. When I'm surviving, there are certain ways I need to make sure that I am keeping myself okay. So I need to make sure that I am eating in a certain way, that I'm getting enough sleep, that I am at the least doing one thing a day or leaving the house once a day or talking to one person a day. And I call this kind of my bare minimum survival strategy. And sometimes that strategy just has to get enacted. And it's actually allowing ourselves to fall back on strategies like this that allow us to reconnect with our dignity. If we are telling ourselves, I will only care about or love you when you are at your best, we're going to keep ourselves in a state of self-hatred at the time when we need our own support the most. So having those fallback plans, having that survival protocol that you can move towards during the periods where you just do not have the natural energy that you wish you had, can go a long way in helping you preserve your dignity enough to get back in connection with yourself. Third thing I would tell someone if I were outsourcing my depression to them is I would say, no matter what, anytime the thought comes into your brain, why are you depressed? What is going on for you in your life or your environment that might be causing this? Tell yourself the story, this is absolutely random and has nothing to do with what's happening outside of my mind. So tell yourself things like, this has nothing to do with my circumstances. A different person would feel perfectly fine right now. This is weakness or a character flaw, or just anything in that category. As opposed to recognizing that your inner and outer world are deeply related. And so if I am actually trying to get out of my depression and reconnect with my authentic feelings, a thing I like to do during depressive episodes is what I call an ideals audit. So an ideals audit is kind of going through my values, which includes my close relationships, the goals that I have for my life, the things that I care about, and asking myself, do I still feel aligned with all of these things? Or is there something about, let's say, the way I'm approaching a certain relationship, or the goals that I've set out for myself, that once fit really well, but that don't really fit anymore in terms of where my curiosity and my energy wants to flow now? And very often I find that when I'm in a state of depression, it's because some ideal of mine no longer fits my life, but I haven't consciously recognized that yet and become ready to let it go. So what this is about is getting really curious about your own inner experience. And rather than telling yourself that the way you feel is random and not connected to anything real, you can take the time, if you let yourself, to actually get really explicitly clear on how your inner feeling state is connected to your outer world. And then you can work your way towards reconnecting to your outer world in a way that is a more natural mirror of what's going on inside of you and what your values and goals are at this stage of your life. Which again means getting connected to those really subtle yeses and nos that exist inside of your body, regardless of what you think you should, want, or feel drawn into or drawn away from. The longer we stay fixated on those shoulds and keep trying to conform our energy toward them, the longer we generally stay feeling disconnected. Fourth thing I would do, just in case, for good measure, if I were trying to get someone else to feel my depression for me and perpetuate it for me, is I would say to them, at least once a day, think of the people in your life who have wronged you and tell yourself very emphatically, I will not be okay until this person comes back and fixes the way that I am feeling. So this is about staying stuck in a state of feeling like our emotions are outside of our own control. And this is not to say that the relationships in our lives do not affect us. Of course they do. But there's a difference between letting something affect us and actually feeling the pain of being abandoned or mistreated or let down by somebody we trusted. There's a world of difference between feeling that pain, mourning it, learning the lessons that it's there to teach us, and then moving forward with new perspective, and sitting around waiting for that person to come back and change the way we feel for us. But there have been so many periods of my own life where I've realized that a big reason why I'm feeling disconnected from my emotions is because I'm not ready to accept that I have lost somebody, or that I have lost some part of a relationship that I wanted to keep the same with somebody who is changing and not relating to me in that way anymore. And so instead of feeling the pain of that, I've put my emotions on ice and waited for them to come back and make the wrongs right. And anytime we are putting our feelings on ice, especially feelings that matter to us immensely, it's a recipe for disconnecting from our emotional selves. The opposite of which is recognizing our hurt, recognizing the hopelessness and the helplessness that is inherent to being let down, actually internalizing that and adjusting the expectations we've been holding on to for those relationships in the future. And it feels very ironic a lot of the time to recognize that depression can actually be our body's resistance to sadness itself, or to grief, or to mourning. Again, depression is not about being stuck in a state of sadness. It's about being stuck in a state of non-feeling. And sometimes that sadness, that acceptance that change we didn't want has happened and that we can't go backwards, is the very thing that allows us to get reconnected to our emotional centers, which include the grief and pain and sadness that we might need to move through. But then on the other side of that, they also include the hope and joy that draws us towards whatever comes next. So those are the 4 things I would do if I wanted to tell someone how to stay stuck in a state of depression. So in a state of being disconnected from their own feelings. And the next things we're going to go over is what I would tell someone if I wanted to make sure that no matter what, they absolutely did not get reconnected to the world outside of themselves. So if my goal was to make sure that somebody else on my behalf did not begin starting over, the first thing I would tell them is no matter what, you must keep punishing yourself by denying yourself joy. When I'm depressed and I find myself in an anhedonic, joyless state, a story I often tell myself that works in the direction of keeping me depressed is, once I start functioning at full capacity again, then I am allowed to feel excited and have good feelings and feel proud of myself. Then I'm allowed to want things again and go for things again. And telling myself that I have to earn my own joy is really effective at keeping me down. The opposite of this is recognizing that joy is imperative for coming out of a state of depression. That happiness we may feel like we didn't earn is actually very often an organizing principle for the rest of our psyches. We are oriented towards wants, towards things that we desire. And so when we identify things that we want and we give ourselves permission to hope for them, if and when those things come into our awareness, the rest of our system naturally starts organizing around how to get those things. And so this is a ridiculous story, but in my last depressive episode, I had not felt anything in the realm of joy or excitement for months and months and months. And then one day I was scrolling mindlessly through Instagram, and for some reason, I got marketed a cruise. And I was looking at this advertisement, this photo of a giant ship, and my body just went, yeah, I want to go on a giant boat. And it was the first sense of joy or intrigue or passion for anything that I had felt in months, and I had no idea why. But I just went, you know what? Even though this is not a wise financial move, and even though I have no idea why I want to go on this boat so badly, I'm going to book a cruise for a month from now. And every single morning for that next month, I woke up with a sense of energy that was distinctly different than I'd had for almost half a year at that point. Because I'd said yes to something in my body that felt like a yes, however ridiculous and however disconnected it felt from the rest of my life. And that very act of saying yes to something reminded me what it felt like to be awake and in the world. And that began an upward spiral out of depression. And it all just started from allowing myself to have a very silly moment of joy and desire and sticking with it. And so if we want to start reconnecting to life again, if that is our goal, we have to listen to joy, and we have to treat it as an organizing principle instead of something that we need to earn in order to access. The next thing I would tell someone if I wanted them to stay depressed and not start coming out of it is no matter what you do, focus on eliminating your bad behaviors and do not focus on adding in new, healthier ones. Tell yourself you have to get rid of all the bad stuff you're doing before you can start doing things that are good for you. So years ago, I was taking this holistic nutrition program at a school called the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And there was this principle they had that I absolutely love called crowding out. So crowding out is when you are working with a client, if you are a health coach or a nutritionist or something like that, who's having trouble of getting rid of things in their diet that they know are unhealthy, but that they keep craving. The idea is that as their coach, you want to encourage them, instead of fixating on getting rid of the bad stuff, to just start adding in a whole bunch of healthy foods to their diet, including healthy foods that are sweet if they have a sweet tooth or whatever it is. And the idea is that if you start setting positive goals, so instead of, I will stop eating chips today, saying, I will get X amount of servings of fruits and vegetables today. Eventually, you're just going to be too full on healthy foods to be able to fit in much in the way of unhealthy foods. And this metaphorically is something I love to apply to my life when I'm feeling depressed. So if I do want to start re-engaging with my life again, instead of saying, okay, I have to fix my sleep schedule, my work schedule, etc., to get out of this state of depression, what if I told myself, I'm going to go hang out with my friends every single day for a week. I'm going to go work on a project that interests me every single day for a week. I am just going to try to connect with the things that I know I love and that feel healthy and inspiring and growing to me. And I'm going to let my bad habits exist right alongside them. And I find that more often than not, this strategy is also a wonderful organizing principle, where the more I get those good, healthy hits of dopamine, the more my system naturally wants to take healthier action. It wants me to sleep enough that I can enjoy my day the next day because my body knows there's something interesting happening tomorrow. If I'm not happy with my eating habits, but I just start doing hard exercise that I enjoy, I find that I naturally start craving the foods that are best going to support my body in those activities. So the idea here is that once again, instead of trying to figure out our entire future at once, we just want to take the next most aligned steps. Sometimes we cannot see step 10 until we have taken steps 1 through to 9. And keeping that in our awareness and remembering that action begets action can convince us to start taking those steps in the right direction, even when our system feels as though it's hopeless. Because often the more we get moving in the direction of where we want to go, the more the path reveals itself. It just sometimes takes a little bit of willpower to force ourselves to get on that path before the sun has risen on it and when it still feels kind of dark and scary. The last thing I would encourage someone to do if they did not want to start taking the first steps out of depression would be to make sure that they do not put their best foot forward and try at anything, again, until they have found their way out of depression and are once again thriving. When we are in depressed states, what we desperately need is mirrors of our potential. So the more we can show up to things, the more we can try at things, the more we can show other people what we're capable of doing now in the state that we are in, the more our best selves, our bravest selves, our most ambitious selves starts to get reflected back to us when we show that version of ourselves to other people. But if we are committed to staying small until we are perfectly polished and all ready to go, we will stay small forever. Because the way we get big is by showing people the best parts of ourselves, having those parts reflected back to us, and then building continuously on them. So we actually need to be seen in these states almost more than any other time because it's how we get out of these states, is allowing other people to meet us where we're at, accepting that we can meet ourselves where we're at, and through that process, where we are at naturally changes. All right, we're coming near the end here, but the last few things I want to touch on is if I found myself starting to get back in motion. So if I accidentally found that I was getting less depressed, here's the advice I would give someone if I were trying to outsource the continuation of my depression to them that would make sure that their progress will get thwarted. The first thing I would say is make sure that you are checking in on your own progress constantly. And every time you take one step forward, expect it to solve your entire life all at once. So this is a cognitive bias that I think it's very easy to fall into when we have been struggling for a long time, where we want to kind of redeem the periods of time that we spent in depression. So I will very often watch things like my work piling up or my friendships going neglected when I'm depressed and tell myself, I have to muster up the energy as soon as I'm feeling better to make good on everything that I have let slide while I was depressed, which is the perfect recipe for putting so much pressure on myself that it becomes almost impossible to return to life at a normal pace, especially because I'm probably still not back at full energy yet. So what I find works a lot better than this is just focusing on increasing my luck surface area for a period of time. This is a concept I did not come up with. I found it on Twitter, but I don't know who said it first. But essentially the idea of a luck surface area is that you just want to take as many steps as you can towards the places in life where you most want to get lucky. So if you really want to find a partner, increasing your luck surface area might look like figuring out what types of events someone you would like to date would probably go to, and then going to a whole bunch of those, and just increasing the likelihood that you might meet someone who you're really interested in. Or professionally, increasing your luck surface area might look like talking to a whole bunch of people about the kind of work you would love to be doing, or putting together a portfolio or projects that you can show to people to really showcase what your interests and skills are. And the more you do this, the more you start engaging in the directions you would like to go towards, the more you increase your chances of the things that you want inside of yourself being met and mirrored in your external environment. So you might not be able to redeem your whole life in a couple of steps, but you can keep moving in the direction of things that might eventually pay off. And so I usually like to set concrete periods of time where I tell myself, I'm going to identify a direction I want to move in, and I'm not going to check until 6 months from now, or until I have taken 30 steps in this direction to see if I'm progressing. Because most often what happens is the more you move in those directions, the luckier you get. But if you're expecting any individual steps to solve everything or redeem everything at once, it's going to get really easy to get discouraged. Once you pick a direction you want to go in, give yourself time for those changes to start compounding. The next thing I would tell myself, if I wanted to thwart my own progress as much as I possibly could, is avoid embarrassment like the plague. So very often when we are depressed, it's because we are mourning or needing to let go of some old ideal or some way of existing or relating to people or doing things that once worked really well for us. And what tends to happen when we do go through the period of mourning and letting go of something is that we then have to develop skill in a new area, which tends to feel so awkward, so uncomfortable, so embarrassing and humiliating. And it's just worth keeping in mind that if we are feeling a little bit emotionally fragile, those feelings are going to hit us harder. But they can also be a clear sign that we are on the right path. So when it comes to the phrase, fake it till you make it, I think that that is terrible advice if what you are trying to make it in is a field or a goal that you don't feel like you're authentically wanting. But if you know for sure that there's a direction you want to go in and you feel excitement and nervousness about it, and as you're stumbling towards it, you're messing things up and getting them wrong and feeling embarrassed, that is when it's generally okay to just let all of that embarrassment be part of the growing pain process. Do not fake your life in the wrong direction. But if you need to fake it till you make it in the right direction, accept that all of those awkward moments and all of those missteps are going to be part of choosing a new path that feels more aligned to you. And you can not only embrace all of that, you can actually be proud of it. Because it just means that your values and your self-alignment is more important to you than some outdated version of your ego that needs to be let go in order for you to move into what you are going to love about your life next. And the last thing that I would encourage anybody who wants to stay depressed indefinitely to do is to keep the things they want a secret until those things come true. But if what someone wanted was to not stay depressed, I would encourage them to start talking about what their curiosities are, what their desires are, and what their growth path looks like as much and to as many people as humanly possible. And the important part here is to not be doing this in a dissociated way. So what this is not is taking that imaginary future fantasy that your body does not feel like moving towards and telling everybody about that. What it means is being open with the people in your life about what your body is saying yes to now, what direction it feels called towards now, even though that direction maybe doesn't feel like it makes a lot of sense. And the reason I would encourage this is because it is the number one way that I have started finding my way out of depression in the past. So sometimes that's look like just saying to everyone I come across, I am looking for a community right now. I am really looking for people who have similar interests to me, and here's what they are, and I want to meet as many of those people as I can, and I want to spend as much time with them as I can. And eventually, I would get connected to the right people. Or saying to everybody around me, I don't feel alive in my work right now, but Here's something I have this thread of curiosity towards that is just pulling me in a certain direction. And I want to learn as much about that as I can. And hey, here's what I am learning about it because I'm giving myself permission to devote time to it. And before you know it, you're attracting people in who have those same interests, who have those same threads of curiosity, and maybe they've followed them a lot further than you. And so it's really fun to connect and learn from those people. But the number one way we get out of these states of resisting the external world is getting connected to what is happening for us internally. However much we want it to not be true, however much we wish it would align with something else that we think we want from our lives. And we learn to honor what is actually in our bodies in the moment. And then the more we grow to accept those things, the more we allow ourselves to reach out into the world and try to find mirrors for them. And the more we get those mirrors in small ways, the more we start to see the connection between our inner world and our outer world as one that is fluid and generative and nurturing for the people that we actually want to be in our bodies. And living this way for myself has always felt like the most profound opposite of depression. Honoring whatever is actually there for me. Giving myself concrete time and energy and resources that I allow myself to devote to honoring whatever is alive in my body. And then giving myself permission to move forward in a new direction. Not to say that this is always easy, but it's to say that if we want to stop doing these things that perpetuate depression endlessly, we have to be willing to honor our internal experience for exactly what it is. All right, I think I'm going to leave this at that for today. But as always, any questions that you guys have coming up as you've gone through this video, or if there are any ways that you're recognizing you are keeping yourself stuck in a state of disconnection from your feelings, as well as what the opposite of that thing is, I would love, love, love to see you sharing that in the comments. I have seen so many amazing exchanges in the comment section between people who are just able to connect on things that they have been through and things they have learned that are now super useful to other people. So please use that as a resource. And as always, I love you guys. I hope you're taking care of yourselves in whatever way feels right to you right now. And I will see you back here again really soon.